The local authority, the Olympic Shire Council, established an emergency response centre in Arthurs Creek.
Which is quite a distance from Strathewen, but there was nothing in Strathewen.
And that provided a place where people in the community could go for support, but it also provided a place where people could meet.
And there were a number of meetings held, one in particular by the Shire. It didn't go well. There was a deep anger because every time authorities seemed to open their mouths, the anger would bubble up.
And people started to talk with one another about how we ought to, as a community, respond to what had happened to us.
We got together representatives of all the existing community groups, and that became the basis of us trying to get a group from within Strathewen so that Strathewen had control of its own recovery.
Rather than having something imposed, albeit by well-meaning people from outside.
Government would do it at some stage, but it would probably be less good for us than if we'd managed it ourselves.
It was clear from the outset that we needed some structure.
The most important building block of our recovery was the communications. We began that straight after the fires, and it began as a text service because it was important that we could get to everybody, and mobile phones were the only way most people had communications.
I remember 2 or 3 days after the fire, first meeting with Bronwyn South, who was trying to do some sort of inventory of who was still around.
He said he was a lawyer, and I said, I think this community is going to need a lawyer.
We'd never met before. She got to talking to me about how we might approach the management of some of the monies that were beginning to be very generously donated by people from outside.
We had promises on one hand, donations on the other, and there was already a member of our community, Marilyn Langmead, who'd been an advocate for Strathewen over many years, and she'd begun publicising the plight of Strathewen, in fact from her hospital bed because she was suffering from cancer.
She sat down in the hospital and started penning this document to try and start collecting funds for the community of Strathewen.
And we were going to need a community voice to manage these donated funds, but also to respond to the government.
And seek some sort of mandate from the community to set something up for the longer term.
It was decided to call a community meeting at the White House, which became a relief centre. A very large number of people attended, probably 60 or 70 people. And the purpose of that was to consider the establishment of an incorporated association. And in order to do that, a constitution had to be agreed upon, and so a constitution committee was called.
More than 20 people wanted to be involved in developing the purpose and then the constitution.
Over a period of 2 months, thrashed out the purposes and the rules of that association. And I think the benefit of that was that everyone understood that we had made our constitution. We were satisfied with the process, and it had taken some time, but then when we met and voted on it as a community, it was strongly supported.
In going through that process, there was a significant degree of ownership built.
The association was incorporated, and then elections were called for committee places. 22 people stood, which is a significant testimony to people's interest in being part of determining the future of Strathewen.
Those that took on those roles took them very seriously. They respected one another, and they respected a diversity of view, and there were certainly differences of view that needed to be accommodated.
It's not that you become this ideal that all gather together and always are all totally inclusive and everybody gets on. That's not communities. They're not like that at all. It's how you stay together while respecting that you're a very volatile, dynamic mix of people.
In some communities, people were appointed to the positions of recovery committee. It was important to us that we had elected people on our incorporated association because they could legitimately speak with authority to government about what people in Strathewen wanted. Of that first 12 committee members, we had a really broad level of skills and experience. It was important because it needed to be a representative committee. It needed to bring to important deliberations that it was considering everything from legal and financial knowledge right through to how people will feel and do feel about the experiences they've been through.
My background is in emergency management and particularly around community recovery, so I became involved in the development of the Strathewen Community Renewal Association.
What was also important was that the local council had ex officio representation, and as did what became the Victorian Bushfire Reconstruction Authority. And those people provided a very important conduit back to those organisations. They didn't seek to sort of impose their ideas on the community, and it became a reciprocal relationship.
I had retired in March of 2008, so I'd had 3/4 of a year living on the land as a farmer, and I'd hoped to go on and develop the farm business further. And of course the fires took everything from fencing to sheds to the home, and then within a very short period of time there I was the chair of the Strathewen Renewal Association Committee, and it was incredibly daunting.
Being of the community and having gone through the same experiences as many other people, it seemed to me that there was one thing I could do, which was contribute to the thinking about how we tried to determine our own future.
Right from the start we knew that renewal was our goal. We needed more than just to recover, and renewal means more than getting back what you had in the past. You have to make your community new again. It will be a different place, but we want to try and preserve some of those characteristics of the old Strathewen and build on it. In the first year we met just about every week. Most meetings would go for 3 hours. First off, find out what people in Strathewen wanted. Then we had to write a plan for the Bushfire Reconstruction Authority. While we were doing all of these committee things, we were also organising public events through our resident support group and all sorts of community activities. There was many meetings with council staff, Vibra staff, and attending the conferences that they ran, and it took the best part of a year just going through that before we were actually able to start implementing any of our projects. And it takes time. People are trying to get on with their lives.
I think the most important thing that Scribes achieved is the coherence of the community.
We were aiming for inclusion, which is incredibly important, and we were aiming for a level of transparency that you don't see in lots of organisations.
The scope which was certainly there for dissonance, for disagreement, for difficulty has been managed over time and managed quite successfully.
Right from the start we tried to work to support anyone who associated strongly with Strathewen. You didn't have to lose property or loved ones to be considered as fire affected. It's interesting when you've been through a disaster like this that everyone from government through to your nearest and dearest friends want things to happen relatively quickly. Their aim is to get things back to normal as quickly as possible, and that often means building something. Recovery from a disaster like this and then renewing a community means so much more than that. People shouldn't be rushed into those decisions, whether it's where to build their house or whether to build a house, and communities shouldn't be rushed into things either. A lot of mistakes get made after a disaster from that kind of rushing. People need to take time.
Over the years we've built a website, an email service, an online calendar, and we've had monthly newsletters, and I think that's really helped people stay connected.
The experience of living through these fires and being part of this community, at times I feel almost privileged to have been part of it. We're now part of a very small group of people who have lived through a catastrophe, and that's quite a unique experience.
Being involved in the association and the renewal of the community has done me a good deal of good. I feel that I have managed to contribute something to the renewal, and I think that's been very important for my own recovery.
Before the fires, I knew a lot of people to wave to, but I didn't really know much about them, and now I feel I know most people to speak to, and I certainly know an awful lot more about what they've been through, and I think that they probably know more about me, and so that's a pretty good basis for a community into the future. Strathewen was a beautiful, beautiful place, and while the 2009 bushfires have taken some of that away, it will be a beautiful, beautiful place in the future. For some people, that means looking after the bush. For me, it also means looking after farming land. And of course, it also means looking after the people and the community and making it a place where people feel comfortable to live together.